Rand, I need another episode of Fully Cinematic.
I recently watched the first two episodes of the Amazon streaming show Reacher. The title character, former U.S. Army Major Jack Reacher, is the subject of 26 novels by author Lee Child. I didn't read any of the books, and I'm probably not going to. But for the sake of comparison, I went back and watched the two Jack Reacher movies starring Tom Cruise to see just how the streaming series stacks up. Now, before the first film even premiered, I heard grumblings about Cruise's casting. While Tom's earned a reputation for being a decent actor and one hell of an action star, fans of the character complained that he was too sawed off for the role. See, the books describe the guy as a big diesel gym rat type who towers over most non-NBA players. 2012's Jack Reacher and 2016's Jack Reacher Never Go Back are borderline mediocre at best. And the problems with the films aren't due to Cruise's performance, much less his stature. However, the hulking frame of the streaming series headliner, Alan Ritchson, doesn't hurt at all, especially given the character's propensity for beating the out of multiple opponents at once. In episode 1, we start in a small town, Margrave, Georgia, one night as some dude is chased down and beaten and ultimately shot to death. Reacher, who's 6'5", 250 pounds, arrives on a Greyhound in Margrave from Tampa the next morning, I believe, while blues legend Howlin' Wolf plays in the background, to visit the supposed hometown of another dead blues legend, Blind Blake. When he gets to a diner, he intimidates a scrawny guy yelling at a girl with a wordless stare. Not long after, 12 shows up with weapons drawn on Reacher before he can start eating his slice of peach pie. He's arrested for murder and zip-tied because handcuffs won't fit. His only piece of ID is a passport, and when his pockets are empty, the cops notice that he's carrying a French war medal. Chief Detective Oscar Finley takes over pretty quickly after Reacher's brought to the station and takes an immediate disliking to him. Sasquatch was arrested because he was spotted walking near the scene of the recent murder. While sitting in his cell, he reminisces about moving to a new town with his family back in 1998 as a kid. He also remembers fighting bullies with his brother Joe, who's his only surviving family member in the present. The second suspect questioned, banker Paul Hubble, confesses to the murder, but Finley deduces that he didn't do it. However, his phone number was found in the corpse's shoe. When Finley concludes that Reacher is innocent, he orders an officer to remove his zip ties, but Frankenstein pops them himself. He then analyzes Finley to a T. He graduated from Harvard, is stubborn, recently quit smoking, and wants to reconnect with his ex-wife. Here we go. Finley returns the favor and, as an FU and a way to kill two birds with one stone, transfers Reacher to prison with Hubble in order to get info out of him, given that he's a former MP with 20 years of experience. Reacher has a brief standoff with a CO during intake and refuses to submit to a complete strip search. Too big for a jumpsuit, Reacher's given scrubs to wear. They were previously given to a Samoan inmate. After Reacher and Hubble are escorted to their cell, Hightower quickly realizes that they were placed in the same section as lifers. Soon, a group of African-American inmates barge into their cell, and the leader pressures Hubble into handing over his shoes, which he keeps, and his glasses, which he stomps on. Next comes the Bush. The same inmate reveals himself which prompts Reacher into beating his ass. He also scares the dudes backing him up into leaving, after one hands over his pair of shades to make up for Hubble's glasses. So this one guy intimidates a whole squad of dudes doing life in prison? Get the out of here. Anyway, when they get to the yard, Hubble tells Reacher that he's a finance manager who was forced to help his bosses with a financial scheme. When Hubble follows Reacher to the restroom, some Aryans come after Bigfoot. He beats the piss out of all of them and gouges one guy's eyes out. A CO breaks it up, escorts Hubble and Reacher to a new cell, and lets them know that they were never supposed to be in Gym Pop in the first place. The lady cop on the force, Roscoe Conklin, Willa Fitzgerald, star of Scream, the MTV show, not the movies, shows up to give Reacher a ride when they're released, and she takes him clothes shopping. A local barber, Mosley, gives Reacher the rundown on the town. And when he leaves, a couple guys who clearly know his history threaten him outside of the barbershop. Conklin cancels their planned dinner when another body is discovered, and Reacher's pressured into going to the morgue in order to analyze the corpse. And it turns out to be somebody he recognizes. That brings us to episode 2. After trying to tail him in her squad car discreetly, Conklin fails miserably when Reacher confronts her. So she drives him to Hubble's house where they meet his wife, played by Richardson's Smallville co-star Kristen Crook. He portrayed Aquaman, she played Clark Kent's first love, Lana Lang. Anyway, after using the old ask to use the restroom so you can snoop around trick, Reacher finds some sort of seed in the mudroom, which Cagney and Lacey recognizes. Later, at the crime scene, Reacher deduces that the second victim was shot twice in the head from a silenced gun. After making his way to a motel, Reacher kicks off into 3 kids who harass him in the parking lot. There were 4 kids in all, but the last one got lucky. Meanwhile, we see 3 guys in white biohazard type suits heading towards the house. The next morning, the Big Show gives water to a dog he sees chained up in front of a house, establishing that he cares about animals. And the owner comes out and confronts him. Andre the Giant goes back to the police station the next morning where Roscoe tells him that a cop was found murdered and nailed to a wall in his home with his balls cut off, just like a threat that was made towards Hubble. The cop's wife was killed too. Reacher predicts that the balls will be found in his stomach during the autopsy. Hubble, meanwhile, has gone missing. Finley, Roscoe, and Reacher suspect that 2 other law enforcement officials are dirty. Mosley later tells Reacher that 2 Latino guys were looking for him. The trio puts Hubble's family into protective custody with Finley's FBI friend Picard, who years earlier advised Finley not to take the job in Wargrave. Lurch reminisces about confronting bullies again who made a kid dance nonstop. In the present, Reacher sees a suspicious car at the Hubbles not long before Picard arrives. That night, Reacher confronts C.O. Spivey, the one who set him up in prison. Spivey has the Latinos waiting for him, but Gigantor fights them until One Time shows up and runs them off. Roscoe treats Reacher's knife wounds back at the station, and Reacher tells her that he figured out that they were former South American Special Forces by their fighting style and use of Glock 17s. Conklin takes him to a roadhouse in Alabama where they guzzle some beers and she shoots her shot by using the fact that Patsy Cline is playing as an excuse to get too tall to slow dance with her. When they leave, during a downpour no less, they're told that the road back has been washed out, so they grab a motel for the night. Smooth move, Roscoe. Callahan strips down to her drawers and a t-shirt and tells Reacher her autobiography when they go to bed. She takes the bed, he takes the floor. She tries to get the BFG to open up, but no dice. The next morning, they drive to Roscoe's house, which was clearly broken into. After heading inside, they see a message stating, "See you soon," carved into the inside of her front door. And we end with that cliffhanger. Back to the Jack Reacher casting issue. While Alan Richardson's a lot bigger than Tom Cruise, technically he's smaller than the character too. Although Reacher's described as 6 feet 5 inches and 250 pounds, Richardson is actually 6'2" and 200 pounds. Interestingly enough, his first taste of publicity came in 2004 when he was an American Idol contestant. And the title character in the 2007 animated film Beowulf was modeled after Richardson. He also grew up a military brat like Reacher. Richardson's size does add a lot to the story, both visually and as fodder for jokes. On the other hand, the movies have better aesthetics. The show does not look like a film, which is kind of too bad. The streaming series has the edge in terms of dynamics. You've got Reacher and Finley's antagonistic but grudgingly mutually respectful relationship, and Reacher's chemistry with Roscoe is a million times better than the dynamic between him and Susan Turner's supposed flirtation, or even with his suspected daughter in Never Go Back. For one, it seems as though something could actually happen between Reacher and Roscoe. And I definitely could have done without the suggestion that the black inmates were the only perverts and cowards. Whole prison full of convicts and the black ones get singled out. All right. You know what? Honestly, the movie show Face Off is kind of a wash so far. I've only seen a quarter of the 8-episode season, so we'll see. In other news, I figured I'd highlight a few comments that we got on recent shows. Commenting on our Belfast review, podcaster Tyrone Dixon said, "Great content." Thanks, Tyrone. We appreciate you saying that. After watching our The Power of the Dog episode, Marcos Figueroa said, "I'm glad I'm not the only one who found this movie to be overrated." No, Marcos, I'm right there with you. Lastly, commenting on our The Harder They Fall / The French Dispatch show, Fresh Out the Shower said, "I saw The French Dispatch and I can agree that it's his best movie. It's very well done. Jeffrey Wright is so underrated. Well, Jeffrey Wright certainly is underrated, but that's the only part of your comment that I can agree with. Shout out to Tyrone, Marcos, and Fresh Out the Shower for watching and for giving us your thoughts. Keep the comments coming. I had enough of this conversation. I'm logging off. I'm out.
Fully Cinematic.